Warren G. Harding was a member of the Republican Party. Speaking of political parties, remember, a party is a group of people who try to gain power in government by winning elections. Now, early on, the Federalists versus Anti-Federalists are not political parties. These are interest groups. They're divided over various issues, but in general, they want to see the Constitution either ratified or not ratified, or maybe ratified with some changes if you're an anti-federalist on the fence. But these are not political parties. We don't get political parties until Hamilton's economic plan during Washington's presidency. Hamilton's economic plan on paying back investors, paying back people who owned bonds. Hamilton's economic plan, including the First Bank of the United States and a high protective tariff to help American industries. This divides the nation into our first two parties, with Hamilton on one side and Thomas Jefferson on the other. Hamilton uses his Treasury connections to build a coalition of supporters. He calls them the Federalists. Jefferson and Madison adopt the name of the Democratic Republicans for their opposition. Some issues divided these parties early on. The French Revolution. Some saw it as the spread of democratic ideas. That was Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans. They supported the French Revolution. They supported the French. The Federalists, on the other hand, saw the French Revolution and really focused on the Reign of Terror and saw it as the worst of mob rule. They saw it as what happens when democracy goes too far. Another issue, United States being harassed. Remember, if it's before World War I, Britain's probably fighting France. Well, that's what was going on. And the United States shipping industry is really caught in the crossfire. French ships are harassing American ships, and the British ships are definitely harassing American ships. And the Federalists want the government to do something about it, to order Britain to stop, to stand up to Britain, maybe even join in and help France. After all, the Franco-American Treaty of 1778 said that we are allies with the French. After all, it was the French who helped us defeat the British in the American Revolution. And Jay's Treaty also divides the nation. Jay's Treaty was meant to address some of the issues still unresolved from the Treaty of Paris, the British not vacating their forts in the Midwest, payment for U.S. ships seized, the unbalanced trade. None of these are really addressed. Even impressment of American sailors is not addressed. Federalists are okay with this treaty, though. They're supportive of Britain. They don't want another war with Britain, Federalists being strong in New England and would really suffer from attacks by the British Navy. But the Democratic Republicans, the pro-French, see this as a sellout to the American people. Finally, the Whiskey Rebellion also divides our first two political parties. The Federalists blame the Whiskey Rebellion on Democratic Republican agents fomenting insurrection in western Pennsylvania. The Democratic Republicans accuse the Federalists of using this small political protest in western Massachusetts as the Federalists' excuse to build a large standing army to suppress the public. So the political parties are going to change after this, in large part due to changes in voting. By the 1820s, almost every state in the Union has eliminated early requirements that existed to own land to be able to vote. So by the 1820s, we can really say that in the United States, there is universal white male suffrage being the right to vote. We also see more campaigning from politicians. At first, early on in American history, it was seen kind of as rather uncouth, as unsophisticated, as unprofessional to campaign for yourself, but campaigning is going to begin as the common man now has the right to vote. And those campaigns are going to be more festive and more dramatic. And we see participation increase. 1840 is the first election with two truly national parties, each nominating one candidate. They're campaigning in all of the states. And as a result, in 1840, 78% of all eligible voters actually voted. It's in this time that we see the emergence of the second political party system. That has everything to do with the guy here, Andrew Jackson, and the party that emerges to oppose him, the Whigs. Jackson has a rather contentious bank policy. Jackson has an expansionist view on presidential power. Jackson has a definitive stance against nullification. And some people disagree with him on many of these things. Those people accuse him of acting like a tyrant, like a king. And so they take the name of the party that had opposed tyrannical kings in England, the Whigs, calling themselves the Whigs in opposition to King Andrew. They're led by Henry Clay. He pulls together a group known as National Republicans. Those are the people strongly in support of Clay's American system. He sides with Daniel Webster, a leader from New England, a leader of many ex-Federalists. You also have some states' rights Southerners like John C. Calhoun will eventually switch from support of Jackson to this party. And you also have the anti-Masonic Party, a group that emerges for a short time with just the goal against secret societies like the Masons. Evangelical Protestants are also a big part of the Whigs. They're concerned with controlling morality and restricting sinful behavior. Many industrialists are part of the Whigs. Many merchants are part of the Whigs. Many really successful farmers are part of the Whigs. And as opposed to their opposition, the Whigs were much more likely to be Protestants. Whigs' beliefs? Well, they believed in what's called a positive liberal state, that the government should support and protect industries that help economic growth. They believed in a government that's active in the economy, protective tariffs, spending tax money on internal improvements like the National Road, and a second Bank of the United States. They also believed in a government that enforces what they called decency, opposition to drinking, opposition to gambling. The Democrats' beliefs, the Democrats at this time are the party of the common man. They're the anti-elite party. They are focused on mobilizing the masses. They are opposed to the tariff. They are opposed to really most government intervention in the economy. They don't feel that federal tax dollars should be spent on internal improvements. They oppose the Bank of the United States, and they think government should, for the most part, stay out of people's personal lives. Government should not interfere in the economy. The Democratic support is built up mainly in the West and in the South. It's mainly small farmers. It's also a lot of immigrants. Small farmers, people working in manufacturing, and as opposed to the Whigs, Democrats much more likely to be Catholic. A big reason why all that immigrant support. The Whigs and Democrats are going to exist as our two major parties, but the issue that they repeatedly kicked down the road, the issue they put off, slavery and its spread, is what's eventually going to be their undoing, especially for the Whigs. This really intensifies in 1854 with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which intensifies that debate over slavery. It's going to kill the Whig Party and dramatically weaken the Democrats. At the same time, slavery and the issue of slavery is dividing the nation. In fact, the Baptist Church and the Methodist Church both split into two separate churches. You have a Northern Baptist and a Southern Baptist. You have a Northern Methodist and Southern Methodist Church. The Democrats are hurting, especially in the North, in large part due to the issue of slavery. The Whigs are effectively done. Northern Whigs begin to move to new parties. Some of them become members of the Know Nothing Party, vehemently opposed to any immigration. Some also join an emerging party that grew out of the anti-slavery, grew out of the free soil movement known as the Republican Party. This even includes some independent Democrats, but it's especially made up of free soilers, people opposed to the spread of slavery. The American Party, that's the name that the Know Nothings took for themselves, is really split on the issue of slavery in Kansas, and that effectively kills the Know Nothing Party, makes them a short-lived blip in American history. It's the Republican Party that supports a transcontinental railroad, that supports government-financed internal improvements. Here we see that influence from former Whigs in the American system. It condemns repealing the Missouri Compromise. This is before the Dred Scott decision. and it is opposed to the expansion of slavery. Free speech, free soil, and Fremont. That was the Republicans' campaign in the election of 1856, because John C. Fremont was their first National Party candidate. More importantly, they're the first party to take an official stance on slavery, the first major party to publicly have a unified stance on slavery. They are opposed to the spread of slavery. The Democrats are going to lose the election of 1860. Many Democrats, remember, Democrats were strongest in the South. The Democrats are going to leave the nation in the Civil War. This really looks like it could be a knockout blow for the Democratic Party. But they quickly revive after the Civil War. They win the House in 1874. They're going to dominate the House for the 20 years after that. Why? Because the Democrats at this time were the party of limited government. That's something that's popular everywhere, because limited government means lower taxes and less government intervention in your life. For many Americans, this was appealing. The Republican Party after the Civil War is the party of civil rights and the party of military rule in the South. Now, many Northerners might be supportive of that, but those kinds of ideas are not going to get any support in the American South. The Republicans after the Civil War promote what they call moral progress. That means supporting the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. They support economic growth and an improvement of material wealth in the United States through things like the Homestead Act to make land available for people out west, through things like grants to railroad companies to further grow the economy from coast to coast, and high tariffs to protect infant American industries. Are they really infant by the late 1800s? Let's fast forward to the 1920s. In the 1920s, the Republican Party crystallizes as not as the party of big business. And here we see a flip-flop. Coming out of the Progressive era, the lines were kind of blurred. And in the 1920s, after the Progressive era, the Republican Party is going to be the party of protecting big business. And by this point, after the Progressive era, that doesn't so much mean a high protective tariff. That really means government staying out of business's way, not using antitrust lawsuits to break up big business, not raising corporate income taxes, and other things that government can do to allow business to grow on its own. The Democrats are kind of lost in the woods in a little bit for the 1920s. It won't be until the emergence of Franklin Roosevelt in 1932 and really solidified in 1936 with his big win when he gets even more votes in an electoral landslide. I mean, look at even his popular vote there. He got over 60% of the popular vote, and the Democrats gained an even larger majority in Congress that same year. How? Well, it has a lot to do with what's called the New Deal Coalition, for the most part, which still exists today. The New Deal Coalition is what Roosevelt mobilizes in his support in 1936, and it's going to make up the base of the Democratic Party for the 20th century. It's urban Americans, voters living in the cities, Western Americans, some people in the South. Now that's going to switch in the 1960s. Immigrants especially, people in labor like organized labor, AFL-CIO, and African Americans. During the Depression, the big change that happens is that middle-class Americans jump from supporting the Republican Party to the Democrats. The last big electoral realignment is going to occur in the 1960s, and it's going to be centered around the ideas of civil rights and the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement is going to be used by the Republican Party to take Southern white voters out of the Democratic Party and switch them to the Republican Party. So that's maybe our last major realignment in electoral politics of the United States. And really, it's in the 1960s that the Democratic Party gets, I think, more strongly associated with the civil rights movement than the Republican Party.